With me today, I have Patson Malisa of South Africa. He's actually the NAID CC in South Africa. And the topic of discussion today will be, is Africa ready for effective implementation of the SDGs? So we're talking about institutions, resources, infrastructure, governance, human skills, systems, and many other things. So can we actually implement the SDGs? So to begin with, I'll ask our guest today, Patson, to introduce himself to the people.
Hello, everybody. My name is Patson Malisa. I serve as the country coordinator for South Africa at the Network of African Youth for Development. My passion is in creating not only just a sustainable framework for implementation of the SDGs, but also for creating a framework of inheritance that allows the next generation to also participate in the development of our continent.
Welcome, Malisa. We hope to learn more from you. So to begin with, I'll ask you directly, because this is the question that we're talking about today. Do you think that, and this is a yes or no question, and then you, of course, you'll explain or you support your opinion. Is Africa ready to implement the SDGs, in your own opinion?
In my opinion, yes. South Africa is ready to implement, or should I say Africa is ready to implement the Sustainable Development Goals.
Africa.
Yes, Africa, not South Africa. Africa is ready. Yes. Okay. So the reason why I believe that Africa is ready is simply because the reason behind these goals is not to be given to a perfect society, but rather be given as a framework for a group of people to take and adapt towards their situations and contribute not only to local development, but also global development. And as many will know, a lot of focus is coming to Africa, especially with regards to the economic developments of the world. It's always been at the center of economics, and I believe that the Sustainable Development Goals will speak a lot to the African problem.
Okay, great. But I have a question, Malisa, and this is the question that we as Network of African Youth for Development have been trying to, ask ourselves and ask our members. Do we know what sustainable development goals are? How familiar are we with these goals? And how familiar are the people, especially in the community, at the grassroots? How familiar are they with the SDGs? Because I mean, how can we implement something that we don't know? I mean, if you ask many young people out there what SDGs are, of course they've had the term SDGs, but do we know what exactly, is sustainable development goals? What do you think?
I think, especially now, negotiations are still going, especially at United Nations level, as to the exact language of Sustainable Development Goals. But in regards to the focus areas and things like that, I think there is a bit of an awareness. I think it also has to be dealt in matters of regions, because I know in East Africa, there's quite a bit of a movement that's going on with regards to promoting SDGs and things like that. In South Africa, on the other hand, or in Southern Africa, you have countries that are isolated by themselves trying to promote it because it speaks a lot to things that are on the ground. In South Africa, however, I will admit that the idea of Sustainable Development Goals is not necessarily mainstreamed as much as it should.
Okay.
Isolation from the rest of the world amongst the common people. Or should I say that amongst the common population. So what then ends up happening is that the goals are relevant when they're being addressed by our government officials, and also, in that regard.
Okay, so we are actually talking, in the region and actually within the country. So I think it's a matter of, the country deciding what exactly they should focus on, and how to incorporate these goals into their actions. Like, for example, in government actions or something like that. Patson, how can we, how can we make sure that the people in the country, the youth, the women, and all the other people concerned, how can we raise awareness, regarding SDGs?
Okay. For example, here in South Africa, one of the things that we are trying to do is we are trying to get civil movements and as well as government to get to be familiar with the work that they do, because one of the reasons why these goals are being created is to address challenges that apply to specific countries. If you go to UN negotiations within interministerial dynamics, many a times the people will be trying to lobby for the exact problem that is really pressing in their country at the time. And I think one of the things that Africa and its countries need to realize is that in order for us to be relevant in those SDGs, we need to create a platform of dialogue between state and civil society for us to be in unison when we take our voice out there in terms of stating what issues really affect us. Because one of the things that end up then isolating us from conscientizing ourselves as to how the world is moving is that we have a very distanced communication line between the guys who make the decisions and the people who actually influence the decisions, who are the people who belong to the state. So what we need to then do is create a bridge for that gap and have them dialogue and have them give us feedback as to what exactly is happening at the negotiation lines, what is being put as center stage, or should I say priorities in order for implementation going forward. And from there, let's then get let's get the dialogue, let's get the conversation going in that regard. I think it's more conversation beyond anything else. We can't rely on other people to then dictate it for us. And I think that's what we'll tend to do with Africa. We're very reaction oriented. We're not proactive. So if we can take the proactive move to actually say, as the language is being drafted, we want to see X and X and X in there. Because in terms of implementation, we're still not there yet. We're still trying to get the language ready. So if we can get together and be in unison as to what we want to see in those goals come September 2015 when they're drafted, we will be on the right path.
Okay, so is it right to say that the person at the people at the grassroots, their voice, they've not been heard, when we're drafting these development goals? Have they been consulted? What exactly would they want included there? So can we say that, in as much as there's a breakdown in communication between the people implementing and the people making these goals, there's also a disconnect between the people at the ground and maybe CSOs and even the other people who are actually formulating these development goals. How can we approach that?
Yeah. Yes, that's actually a very good point. In fact, one of the things that was noted by one of our officials here who belong to the United Nations Children's Fund is she was noting this and say that they're representing civil society, but which demographic can they say that they've actually consulted first in order for them to come up with the opinion that they have? And I think that's the thing that we need to fix as CSO leaders. We are not supposed to be in suits all the time. We're supposed to be in trenches amongst the people. We're supposed to be there where the real problems are. If it means that we must sleep in the slums with them and find out how it feels so that we can develop the passion to then lobby those type of goals, then we must do exactly that. We can't expect ourselves to be respected as leaders of civil society if we are not in touch with our civil society. So I think this is a need for introspection with every leader of an organization or of a movement, whatever you call it. How in touch are you with individuals within your movement? Do you know the real plight on the ground, or are you just reading the newspaper and then going up there and then telling us that this is the problem in your country? You know, I think that's one of the things that we really need to get sorted.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. So now let's look at the different things that may actually challenge the implementation of SDGs in in Africa, and we'll start with institutions, from the state institutions to local governance to all the other institutions in the country, in Africa. So we have strong institutions that can actually enable Africa to effectively implement these SDGs.
Yes, I can hear you.
So, did you hear my question before?
You asked about how familiar the people are with the SDGs.
Exactly, depending on from your experiences in the community and in your country.
Oh, that is it's at a low scale, because in my community, the only people who are familiar with the SDGs are those some few in schools, and it depends per course that they're taking, and we can start it from the university level, but majority are not yet familiar.
How can we make sure that people, actually understand these SDGs? The people at the grassroots, the communities that are actually affected directly by these goals. How can we make sure they are aware of these goals and they are aware of their roles that they're supposed to play to actually effectively implement these goals?
Actually, you can use the social media as we often use,
yes.
And also through advocacy program and awareness in schools, university, or even an advert in the newspaper about the SDGs and the way forward. And we can do this by using young people, because for the case of Tanzania, the only implementing agencies for the SDGs are the United Nations, which are more aware of the SDGs, unlike other CSOs. So I think advocacy and awareness, even debating programs, and this can be different platforms, different youth-led organizations.
Okay.
Since the SDGs comprises of a lot of issues you can discuss from any goal, from gender, goal number 5 to others,
Definitely, yes. The question is, has Africa had enough of these development goals in the wake of MDGs and what they managed to achieve and what they didn't achieve? Should Africa be given a break to try to do something else, or are these SDGs or the various development goals that have been set over time, are they actually making a significant difference in Africa?
Actually, they are not making a significant effect in Africa, because these goals are, if you look at the layout of the goals and even the explanation of the goals, they are more made for the developed countries rather than developing countries, and the more impact is seen in the developed countries rather than in Africa. So I think there has to be a way forward, even when the goals are being laid out, on how Africa will be able to achieve those goals. Because you have to have that lookout. You cannot like have a bigger vision in a continent which is yet not even halfway there to that development part.
Exactly, and I think Malisa actually mentioned this part before, that there's a breakdown in communication between the community or the people who will directly benefit from these goals to the people who are actually formulating these goals. So it's like a top bottom approach, where we've not asked the people what do they want, how do they want to do this, so I think that's something that we actually should take in account. So Malisa, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so then if you I'd actually, and I already asked Petrider what now in the wake of MDGs, and all the other development goals that we've had over time, do you think Africa now needs a break from these development goals? I mean, we've had MDGs, now we're just about to start another phase in SDGs. So is it time to say, well, we need a break now, or have we seen significant changes within Africa over time out of these development goals?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we tend to do, especially when it comes to the issue of development,
Yes.
we look very much at specifically poverty and its effects, and then remove all the other strides that have been made. One of the things that people must understand about Africa is that it has been in the middle of a very huge transition. I mean, it had only been 6 years since the last African country that needed liberation had been liberated, apart from, of course, the colony that is up north in sub-Saharan Africa. So the transitions that were needed at that time made it seem like if our contribution to the MDGs were rather slow. But when you look at the political reform as well as the policy reform that has taken place in Africa, we have actually gotten to a point where, in terms of the goals dealing with stability and in terms of good governance, we are starting to make strides. I mean, the new constitutions that have been developed in Kenya and also in places like Nigeria. It was 1999 when they adopted theirs, but it has been implemented all along. And that was a country where you didn't have freedom of speech and all of that. Now, if you look at Facebook and you see how these young people are busy messing around with the politicians, I mean, that would not have happened before that constitution was implemented. And even in Zimbabwe as well, they adopted a new constitution just before their prior elections. So there has been development, and also certain economic policies that have been adopted in terms of sub-regional trade. I mean, ECOWAS now, they're starting to trade freely. There's free movement in East Africa, and SADC is also trying to get to that point as well. So, these are just a few case studies amongst the whole lot of reforms that have had to take place. So these SDGs going forward are really necessary, especially if we're going to look at things going forward. We need those frameworks in order for us to channel for progress, because Africa still has a lot to do. As much as we have the attention of the world because of our resources and all of that, we need to learn how to protect them, and we need to also learn how to trade properly. And those things are going to be a result of us adopting the framework of the SDGs, and also teaching the world how to treat us. In personal terms, we would say that you teach people how to treat you. So even in terms of our relations to the rest of the world, we will need this framework to teach them how to treat us when it comes to economic trade and also other policy implementations going forward.
Okay. So does this mean that actually, given what Africa has had to go through, and dating back to colonial times and making all those strides. So does this mean that we have some substantial development that has actually occurred, and probably this is why we would say that Africa has been derailed a bit in terms of making progress because of this all these things that have been affecting us, changes in political systems, the constitution, just like you mentioned, stuff like that. And you actually mentioned Nigeria, and then you mentioned Facebook. So that will take us to the next question, and this should actually be interesting. How well wired is Africa in terms of technology? Do we have the technology that will actually enable us to implement these SDGs? Because one of the things that actually is important when we're coming to implementing various development goals, regardless of what they are, is technology. And we all know Africa has been lagging behind in that. So what will we need to do, and at what level are we actually at the moment when technology do we need to do more? Do we need more innovations within the different African countries, or what exactly is the situation?
For me, especially when it comes to information technology,
Yes.
I think that issue is more a matter of distribution rather than capacity. You see, it's we have a term in economics where we say that economics is the study of how to distribute scarce resources in huge demand. And if we consider information technology to be a resource, we would see that there's a lot of innovations in Africa. But the question is, how far have we gone in distributing that? If you look at some of the developments happening in Nigeria and also in Kenya, I mean, there's an ICT boom that is actually taking place in East Africa as we speak, and it's been going on for quite a while. And the question now is, in that boom, how many East Africans are actually exposed to it? So it's not a matter of whether the technology is there. The question is it distributed accordingly towards the relevant people and also towards the rest of the population? And I think that question is something that needs to be dealt with in collaboration of both the techno gurus of Africa as well as government, because at the end of the day, I think government needs to take on information distribution as a means of service delivery, because it's actually part of our rights. We have the right to information, So it has to be something that then obviously gets distributed across the population as a matter of government urgency, if we can put it like that. So it's really a matter of distributing the technology. But to say that it's there, it is there. It's not scarce. We have a very capable infrastructure and very capable technicians in the continent.
Okay. So Petrider, what do you think? I think she's gone. So in relation to the issue of technology, Malisa, let's talk about social media. How can we harness the power of social media to actually enable us to effectively reach to the people who, create a pool of people that can be used as a drive towards implementing these goals?
I think it's really a matter of attitude. Many a times when we go on Facebook, especially with regards to politics or with regards to development, we are only going there to state the problem. And very seldom do we see a lot of solution trends there. Many a times it's also reaction. It's a reaction, to a problem that would have happened. I think if we can develop a strategy to proactively make SDGs a trend, amongst African social media platforms, or should I say social media communities, we would find ourselves going far. I think also if we can also promote other movements that are actually doing something with regards to development and get them to see how they fit into the whole idea of SDGs. You know, I think many a times we have a fragmented voice because of the fact that people don't see how they fit into the whole circle because they've had to grow in isolation. So I think that's also the mandate of the Network of African Youth for Development. We are here to also give that platform to show how each effort, as much as it's distanced in terms of geographical placement, but it's actually part of a huge community of Africans who are trying to actually make the world a better place by starting at home. And I think this platform is definitely the perfect place to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I think that that's a big issue, and that is something that probably affected the MDGs and the implementation, because there's a lot of efforts going on. Actually, I've seen it through NAID, because we have people in, say, Kenya, in Uganda, in South Africa, in Sierra Leone. People are doing what they can at their community, but we don't have we're not connected in a way, you know. Of course we have need this platform, yes, but we need people to come together, more collaborations between you know, people working in probably the same sectors. For example, in education, you know, I think that's something that is actually missing in most of these countries. It's a way. So how would we encourage, you know, CSOs working in different countries, say people working in Kenya and people working in Uganda, to come together? In what ways would we collaborate? Should we have to do that?
Yes. Yes, I was saying that in terms of collaborations, we really need to learn to trust one another. And one of the things that we really need to take care of is the issue of gatekeeping amongst ourselves. We try and keep ourselves away from certain groups or certain people, and if they are otherwise, we also try to press them down. I think that needs to be dealt with, and the only way that we can do that is to get into platforms where we actually engage more and we talk more. On a grassroots level, I would suggest that we do more interactive workshops where we do collaborative introductions of each organization to each constituency. You know, many a times when we want to do an event or anything like that, we only look for partners for the sake of putting it on our letterhead. We're not seeking funding. But when we want to talk about collaboration, those names should be a lot more than just icons on a letterhead. They need to be proactive, be part of us, be part of what we're doing, part of the problem that we are trying to solve, or should I say part of the solution. They can't be part of the problem, they need to be part of the solution. That if we can come together a lot more for interactive workshops and things like that, it'll definitely be good for us to begin with going forward.
Okay, great. So one of the other issues that will actually determine how effectively or to what extent you know, the SDGs are realized at the community is the institutions that we have. So looking at the African countries, Malisa, how strong are the institutions that we have? Be they government, you know, institutions? How strong are they? Can they actually handle the, you know, the huge task that stands before them of, you know, getting these SDGs and implementing them?
I think that'll be a issue of evolution, if I can put it like that, because to say that we are fully in state capacity would not be true, because in some countries, yes, we have good systems where it's not only just the executive that has a say, but there's also what we call Chapter 9 institutions which help with in terms of keeping the executive accountable, making sure that there's no corruption, making sure that there's no violation of the Constitution. Now, I think some countries, like I'm very fortunate that in South Africa we have that, and we're actually in the middle of a controversy where a Chapter 9 institution, namely the Public Protector, has had an issue with our president, and now the question of whether that institution is effective is now coming into the question, you know. So, but for the past 20 years, we said we have a public protector, but now when her job is now being should I say, being implemented, now, you know, you've got your executive trying to tell you, no, she's limited to this, she's limited to that. Now, those type of things need to be addressed on a continental basis. There are some countries without any accountability organs at all that are recognized. So we're really going to have to do something about that going forward. I think if we can develop a framework from the African Union going down as well, as to how accountable are our leaders to the governance, and also first of all to their people, and also to their peers, because what they do wrong ends up affecting the rest of Africa. So that intent often obviously then derails investment from them as well. So, you know, I think if we look at those that dynamic as well, it'll really be good for us.
Okay, Malisa. So now moving on, and that is in relation to what you just mentioned about, governance and institutions, and the systems that are actually in place. So we know that good governance will include transparency, accountability, and it is open to the people, and it is actually responsive to the needs of the people and to the situation in the ground. So how can and we also know that SDGs and the implementation part will actually include finances. It will include funding here, right? So the question of misappropriation of these funds that will actually, be put towards the SDGs arises. So how do we ensure that this time round, funds that are meant for, say, to go towards education, to go towards health systems and other sectors, that these funds are actually not misappropriated and they actually do what they're supposed to do? How will we ensure that there is no corruption or anything like that?
Yes. As I was saying, that when I look at the relationship between governance and also allocation of funds, I think many a times the reason why corruption is actually, there's room for corruption, is because the capacity within the institution itself is not prepared enough to actually then give the type of assistance that's necessary. In terms of, when I speak of capacity, I speak of the knowledge to actually implement, the will and the skill. So that's where civil society comes in. I believe that the relationship between government and civil society, like for example in Africa, our laws state that a civil society organization that actually delivers a public service is considered a public benefit organization, which then ends up being tax deductible on all donations, because it's considered to be a state delivery institution. So the question now is the relationship between the public benefit organization, or let's call it CSOs for now, the CSOs and the government. Are they willing to come to the table and talk implementation? Many a times when government and CSOs meet, it's a matter of CSOs pointing the finger at government and saying, you're not delivering. Why is this problematic? Why is that problematic? Why aren't you answering my calls? Things like that. And government also is abrasive. They're also thinking, okay, these guys simply just want. They don't want to give anything. So if we can fix that relationship and get them to realize that, yes, you fix the policy, and you write the laws, But when it comes to implementation, you need us. You need civil society, and civil society must also recognize that it is their right to go to government and be able to say, when it comes to implementing this goal, that goal, we need you and you need us, and we can give X amount of this, and we will need X amount of the budget. So I think that relationship will be necessary. But in terms of accountability as well, because it's not only government that's corrupt, it's also CSOs. I mean, there are CSOs who receive funds and also do nothing. So it's really a matter of us then getting a institution that we both agree to be under. Like for example in South Africa, you've got your public protector, you've got your state security, your special investigative unit, things like that. The rest of Africa, I believe that there are also the institutions that deal with that. So if we can create an awareness and a respect for those officers to say that we are indeed accountable to them, and we submit ourselves to that office for accountability purposes, we will find ourselves going a lot further.
Yes. So, Malisa, are these organizations or the institutions, are they going to act as monitors of these processes, or do we need to put in place some, some specific institutions that will come and monitor the implementation? Because I think that's also something that we need to take into account. It's not just getting funds to a specific place. We also need to know what's going on, what's been done, what has been done. If the implementation is going through the CSOs or maybe through government agencies, how or who is going to actually come and monitor these people throughout the implementation period?
Yes, indeed. Like I did mention, as you've said, the public protector. These institutions are independent of government, but they are recognized state institutions. I think if we look at the development of Africa, especially with regards to its governance, it needs such at the moment. If we can get a sort of accountability going on amongst our leaders, who, let's put it like this, if they agree to actually submit to accountability, we will be going far. And it needs to be both locally, and it also needs to be regionally. On a sub-regional basis, I've seen a lot of interventions going on amongst the peers. I know, for example, here in Southern Africa, when there was a problem in Zimbabwe, SADC came together and they said, no, guys, fix your problem. And it was fixed. And the same thing also happened in Lesotho recently, where our deputy president was actually appointed as the SADC head negotiator. So, but now when you then go back to the grassroots level, that accountability then suddenly disperses. There is no state institution that can call on the president and say, but why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? So we need to actually create a model for state accountability. And that will obviously need to be a recognized state institution. It has to be independent of the executive, if I can put it like that. Because the moment the executive has to monitor itself, it can hide other things. It can, exactly. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So it needs to be an independent state institution.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, we're in March right now, and hopefully the SDGs are going to be adopted in September this year. So do you think this is something, from your experiences or, from what you've seen, especially in South Africa, do you think this is something that, that has already been considered? Or is this something we're going to come and think about after we've started with the with the SDGs, probably next year or something, because I think that should be already be in the process of being done if countries and governments have actually committed to SDGs, or if they actually will commit to SDGs towards the end of this year.
Well, I will say that at a negotiation level, there is always a particular portion for accountability. And that accountability portion is usually then governed by a certain treaty, which I think it was the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, I think. In there's detail of the type of institutions that would need to be used in order for member states to account and all the like, both locally and also internationally. Because corruption is not only a matter of affecting the people on the ground, it also affects global relations. Because many a times you get into a treaty with a country, you tell them that if you do this deal with us, we will get X amount, and we will then do this with that amount. And then when they don't do that, the confidence and trade and trust in one another falters. So it affects diplomacy at the end of the day. So it's going to have to be a matter of international and national importance that accountability be used as a mechanism for implementing serious sustainable development goals.
Okay, Patson. Now, moving on, and I think you mentioned this before when I was asking you about the governments and institutions. But do we have the right human resource? Are they well equipped in terms of, do they have the necessary skills? Do they actually know what entails the SDGs? Are these, and I'm not just talking about people working in government institutions. I'm talking about even the people in running CSOs and the people actually working with the with communities at the ground. Do we have the right human capacity to handle SDGs?
I think it also goes regionally, because one of the things that we tend to look at is who is saying the term the loudest, but we never actually then look to then say who is actually doing something on the ground about it. Many a times we will say that SDGs need to be promoted. But then now when it comes to implementing them, it then goes beyond the language. You need to then have people who are working on the ground and doing things. Now, if we then look at places like, let's say, Southern Africa, the civil society organizations are pretty much more advocates than implementers at the moment. There are some who are doing it, but they're not necessarily in the mainstream. So capacity is there, but it's not being recognized. In East Africa, I know of certain CSOs that are actually doing things, and they are in the mainstream. But then there are advocates who are then not necessarily given the type of mileage that they should, or should I say the type of exposure that they should be given. And then also in West Africa, same thing. Whereas you have people who are doing things on the ground, they're not necessarily saying SDGs, but they're actually contributing to it. So the capacity is there. But the question is it being mainstreamed? Are people actually mainstreaming the idea of implementing SDGs when they do what they do? I think that uniform language needs to be promoted more.
Great. So in relation to that, Malisa, when you look at the education systems in many parts of Africa, all the way from the lower primary schools all the way to higher education, is the education system that we have in place, is it preparing people, young people, well enough for the next phase of development? Because as we tend to say here at NED, we want and we're actually working for youth-led development. So I think this is one of the major things that is actually going to characterize the next phase of development that will fall under the SDGs. So is the education system preparing young people well enough, for the not only the implementation, but for people that can actually question, people that can call the institutions into accountability? What do you think about that?
So, like I was saying, it seems like the system from day one teaches us that you must be entitled for the rest of your life. The moment you leave university, you must be entitled to a job, and you must be entitled to a promotion for having stayed on that job for 20 years. And after those 30 years that you've been there, you must retire. And that does not necessarily speak to development, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, development is about breaking boundaries. It's about getting new grounds out there. Where is the innovation of it all? Where is the part of encouraging our entrepreneurs? Where is the part of encouraging for new science, new technologies? I mean, if you look at many of the master's degree students in sciences, all the experiments are either repetitions of what someone else has already done, or they're trying a new thing and it will stay in the lab. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not good. It's not good for Africa. We need to develop a system that works for us. And we need to get our scholars together, our academic population, to actually admit that no, what we have now as syllabuses is not going to take us forward. We need to actually be more innovative. We need to understand that the problem that we have will not be solved by a system we inherited. We need to create new education systems that address what we have now. So really, for me, that is a situation that really boils the blood, if I can put it like that. We really need to fix that.
Definitely, Melissa. Actually, that's also a very important thing. It's something I'm very passionate about personally, about education, because I mean, it's one of the basic things that can actually change Africa for the better. But just like you said, I think we've been incapacitated by the system that is in place now. And that brings us to another question. How do you think that we can bring the academia to development? Because we've not seen a lot of activity or energy coming from the academia. I mean, of course, we talk about systems and we say that no, this is not working. I mean, times have changed, so we also must change the system. But besides that, I haven't really seen something constructive being done. How can we bring the academia towards development? Because I think the purpose of education, and especially higher institutions of learning like universities and colleges, they're supposed to address specific problems happening in the community where they're actually based. But just like you said, we don't see this happening. People know that you go through your school time, and then after you graduate, get a job, and a set sort of way. But in your opinion, Melissa, how can we bring the academia towards development? How can we bring that collaboration right now between the people in academia, the scholars, and even young people in universities and in other places towards active engagement with, in development?
Okay, I think one of the things that we realized, especially with regards to development, especially academia, when they usually address development, they're doing it from a case study point of view. It's never part of the solution. Many a times they just come, they study, they observe, and they just let the experiment go as it is. You know, they don't input, they don't. All they're looking for is outputs. They're looking for results. You know, for example, here in South Africa, many a times if you're going to do public development or something like that, you are taken to a slum, and in that slum you're told, okay, just do a case study, interview a few people, ask them what's happening and things like that, and then just write a thesis. And then from there, it stays there, and it doesn't even go back to the people and say, this is what we found out, you know. So we need to make academia conscious that their information is necessary for us to be able to implement proper sustainable development goals. If we can get our people, if we can get our people on our universities to be, let's put it like this: if they can be propelled or motivated, given incentives to be able to realize that their work should not only just be a matter of case study, but also finding the solution to the problem. You know, we will actually go forward. I think because the doctorate degrees are supposed to address such challenges, you know, because they're supposed to deduce the problem, and then from there be able to then provide solutions. And then that solution should not be kept in the library, it must be shared, you know. So I think if we can make each individual learner conscious of that role in terms of academia, we will go far.
Don't you think then that the government should actually mandate, you know, these universities, like, you know, create that link? You know, people don't just come and do projects and do some research for a while and then write a thesis and that's it. Don't you think like the government needs to do more in terms of collaboration with, you know, the various universities? You know, like mandate them to, you know, you have this number of graduates this year, they're working in this field, we need to see what they're doing, and you know, after that we need to sit down together and see what can actually be done, because we go and identify the problem just as you said, but then that's it, we just write a paper and, you know, end business. But should these people you know, come and sit together and try to, and even sit together with the people that were actually, you know, studied the subject of a particular project, for example, sit together with, you know, maybe come up with a mechanism where the government and the university and the people involved in a particular research come together and see how they can actually come up with solutions or something like that. Do you think this is something that can actually be done?
Almost definitely. I think in this regard, government will really have to be the first one to extend the hand, because they of course are on the ground. So they need to be able to then say to academia, please, let's work together. I think there are times where one needs to get off their high horse and realize that they need certain people. And yeah, if our governments can do that with academia, we will go very far. All that is needed is a stretch of a hand, and we'll go far.
Okay, fine. Now moving on from academia, but of course we'll make sure that you know, they actually get the results of this discussion. We've had that the next phase of development actually will include almost everybody. People are saying leave no one behind, so that people who are actually also marginalized and people who've been left out by other development plans, this time around that they are actually brought into the process. So how can we ensure that development under the SDGs will be all inclusive? You know, we're talking about people regardless of their gender, regardless of their location, and regardless of their status in society. How can we make sure that SDGs are going to be all inclusive in the community?
This is where the issue of civil society comes into priority. Because civil society organizations are supposed to be the bridge between huge institutions and the people on the ground. Not everybody is going to be a leader. Not everybody is going to be at the negotiating table. But the leaders of civil society organizations, or should I say even the people working in civil society organizations, need to make it their mandate to make sure they're in touch with their populace, whether in regards to giving feedback, whether in regards to implementation, or in regards to getting feedback from them to take to government. You know, if we can get more of that, and if we can promote that among CSOs to let them know that their job is to really be the fort on the ground, to be the lever between government and civil society. In order for government to be lifted, in order for civil society to be lifted, civil society is going to have to be the lever that is going to be used in order for these goals to take place. Because without them, there is no link. You know, many a times we take it for granted that simply because politicians came from us, they now are always going to have news of what's on the ground. That's not necessarily the case, because now they have to deal with language that is not even in relation to the ground most of the time. They have to deal with laws that have been 300, 400 years in the making, and in some cases 2 centuries, or should I say 2 millenniums in the making. You know, so the moment they have to deal with that information, they will obviously become detached from the people on the ground. So you then need civil society to then always be that remembrance to say, look at what's on the ground. This is what's happening on the ground, and this is how you can change it. And we are willing to help you in implementing that change. And then at the same time, we then also then have to go back to the public and then say to them, look, understand how things work in government and how things work in government, in public institutions. You know, let's work together. Let's understand them, and let's also provide a solution on the ground. Let's make this plan relevant to the ground and get people to adapt it, make it their own through dialogue, through conversation, and also through projects that are relevant to the ground. I mean, you can't go to a village and then say to them, look, we want to take, and then they ask you, but how? You know, but if you go to them and they say, look, we understand this land is full of maize production, there's a lot of potential for beans, things like that. You know, people make it their own. They say, okay, that's language I understand. Let's get together. Let's see how can we use that portion of land that hasn't been utilized. You know, things like that. Those are just simple tips that can be used. You know, because I think we mystify these goals. If I can be honest with you, we mystify sustainable development. Yet it's so simple. It's a matter of us simply engaging in things that have not been activated yet, which have potential. That's simply what sustainable development is all about. It's activating potential.
True. I actually agree with you, and I think we'll have to let the people, you know, members of NAID know that, you know, because they're the people working at the community, you know, directly at the in different projects at the community. So I think we'll need to let them know that. So now moving on to another huge factor in, you know, the implementation of SDGs. It's finance, Malisa. Where are we going to get the funds, you know, to fund SDGs?
Yes.
And this is in relation to the question of aid. I mean, I always ask people this question. Do we still need aid, or where are we going to get the money to finance SDGs?
We're going to have to trade smart. I think that's one of the things that Africa is going to have to wake up to. The ability to trade smart and to be able to realize that we have a lot of advantage when it comes to the fact that we have resources. One of the professors I've met in South Africa was saying, it seems like the world is in a rush to have Africa mine out all its resources. Yet, that will obviously leave us impoverished, will leave our ecosystems damaged. There is a way of mining out these resources that would not affect us and at the same time also leave us at an advantage. The problem with mining everything out within a short period of space of time is that it then also leaves us irrelevant, you know? So we have the leverage of resource at the moment. As much as it's raw material, first of all, we need to actually negotiate a good deal with things like that. And of course, there are other complexities that come with that, but I think that's something that we're going to have to, for aspiring diplomats, if I can put it like this, we are going to have to be smarter because many a times we are, our forefathers, or should we say even our fathers, you know, they're put in a position where they're landlocked because they have a huge amount of debt that's owed to the IMF and the World Bank and all of that. And at the same time, the people who fund the majority of that debt are the ones who are trading with us concerning our resources. And at the end of the day, because of our debt and because of our dependence on that aid, we then end up giving out our resources for a much lesser deal than we are supposed to. We need to fix that. I think it's the mindset. We need to realize that we actually do have leverage. Many of the billionaires that you hear of in the world manage a lot of huge debt themselves. And the reason why they can still live lavishly is because of the fact that they are able to realize where their value is. So if we as Africans in our trade realize where our value is and not really focus on where the debt is and where the inefficiencies are, we'll find ourselves being better tradesmen.
Definitely agree with you on that point, Malisa. So we are actually almost coming to a close, but before we go, we have a few questions, probably three or so. We've seen the case of, you know, natural disasters and things like and epidemics coming up, you know, out of nowhere in Africa, and then causing massive losses of lives and, you know, resources and stuff like that. So how can we ensure that, you know, the process of development that we're just about to begin, or rather to go on with, is not derailed by natural disasters or epidemics like Ebola?
That is a very good question. And it also goes context as well. If we want to fully develop in Africa, we're going to have to be, in a way, interdependent on each other in many facets, because there are some things that can be derailed by natural disasters and also by epidemics, and there are other things that don't necessarily get affected by that. In a country that is totally reliant on trade and things like that, an epidemic would be very terrible.
Exactly.
You know, but that now calls for new innovations, new things to actually be invented. And Africa at the moment, in fact, statistics show that Africa might actually become, has actually started to become a lot cheaper in terms of manufacturing textiles. The cost of manufacturing textiles in Africa is a lot less now than in China. So those are the type of sectors that we could decide to take on. I mean, because I've heard that apparently for you Nigerian garments, or should I say the fabric, many a times it's actually imported from China, you know. So imagine if we actually take a hold of one of those as one of our sectors to begin with, you know, we could actually go further. So these are one of the things that we should really look at. It's really going to be us being flexible in what we trade and how we trade, because development is stimulated by trade, it's stimulated by economics. So the moment we make sure that the macroeconomic factor of it is not solely dependent on one product. In fact, that's one of the things that brought Africa down, because, or should I say, that actually affected the move of the Pan-African movement from 1960 going forward, because one product the price suddenly goes down, or it's not in demand, or it's not being produced, and then the whole country goes into crisis because there's not demand for any other product, or there is no other product being manufactured. So we need to be multi-disciplined in what we are trading and how we trade with the world. That will definitely help us in keeping us from being derailed by any of these type of things.
Agreed, Melissa. So there you have it, people. Definitely, the next phase of development is going to be full of young people, young, energetic people like our guest today, Patson Malisa. And despite the challenges that we may expect going on, we must keep going on. And we mentioned a few challenges that we actually need to take into account, even as we move towards adopting SDGs at the end of the year. So we need governance, we need institutions that are actually open and that are very strong. We also need a human capacity. We need to build the capacity of our people working either in implementing the SDGs, or people at the community level, especially the CSOs. We also need to look into the education system. We need to build systems of collaboration between the academia and development, and actually the people in the community. So we need to make it work, come up with new innovations, new solutions to existing problems. So these are the things that you as as a young person, or you as someone working in a government agency or in CSOs, you actually need to take these things into account. So thanks very much for our guests today. Patson Malisa, our country coordinator in South Africa. We're delighted and honored that you actually came through. Our next hangout will take place in April on the 11th, the second Saturday of the month. And we're going to look at climate change. We're going to look at the fossil fuel lobby versus the climate change goals. So prepare for that. We hope that you can leave us questions when we finally have it up, and we hope to see you then. So on behalf of Network of African Youths in Development, my name is Judy Annette. See you next time.